Hi there, my name is Jeff, and this is the 2025 Range Rover Sport PHEV, which means it's a luxurious but off-road capable plug-in hybrid. But then the kicker is it has 543 horsepower and 590 pound-feet of torque. So just how does that play out? Let's find out. Those massive power figures come courtesy of this, a mild hybrid turbocharged 3-liter straight six rated for 543 horsepower and 590 pound-feet of torque. That important figure is the torque figure because that's what really moves this thing, and it's a torque monster. You'll feel it when you drive it. That engine is then paired with an 8-speed automatic transmission which delivers power to all four wheels in classic Range Rover fashion, being all-wheel drive of course, to survive all sorts of weather conditions as a fantastic daily driver. Now this thing is also properly quick. We're talking 0 to 60 in just 5.2 seconds. Now that's not going to keep up with the sportiest of SUVs, but it's going to be faster than just about most vehicles on the road, and it will have no problem going up hills even when fully loaded with people or cargo. So that's great news. The really cool part though is it's still a plug-in hybrid, and that gives you some extra flexibility, and that's because it has an electric only range of up to 54 real-world miles, which means, yes, if you're plugging this in, you can daily drive it to work without using any gas or just use it on short trips around town. But you're not limited to that because it still has that gas tank, which gives you up to a combined 460 miles of range, making this an excellent road trip vehicle that can drive on just gas only, even if you completely deplete that PHEV power. The benefit, of course, is the option, the flexibility to choose either gas, hybrid, or even just EV power, which makes this quite an interesting vehicle. On gas-only power, it's expected to average around an EPA-rated 21 miles per gallon, which I can say is probably, if anything, a little bit low. In my time with the vehicle driving mixed driving in Phoenix, I've been averaging around 23 miles per gallon with both city and highway driving, so it's fairly efficient. That being said, this is definitely a powerful engine, and if you can't keep your foot out of it, it's definitely going to be thirsty for gas, so your mileage may vary depending on how it goes with that system. The benefit is, at the end of the day, you have what can be an incredibly efficient powertrain, especially when you're keeping that battery system charged, but of course it doesn't ruin the practicality or limit you to charging stations because you can still take it wherever on gas-only power while still having a properly fast Range Rover. Next, let's take a closer look at this $118,000 Range Rover Sport. On the exterior, still instantly recognizable with all of the elegant styling we've come to expect of a Range Rover vehicle. The Sport, of course, being a little bit unique by having a sort of shorter, stout look to it, but that can, of course, still help with things like off-roading. It is also very off-road capable at that, with 11.1 inches of ground clearance. Now, admittedly, I understand that most of these won't ever touch dirt ever, but in the event that you do take it off-road, even on trail roads, it has all sorts of cool dynamic off-road modes in addition to pretty good approach and departure angles and even water fording characteristics, which is all really, really cool. Now, diving into the specifics of the front of the vehicle, you of course have a suite of LED lighting throughout the entire vehicle. You'll also notice there are cameras everywhere as well, which will help with off-roading in addition to just normal things like parking, for example, and you combine that with all the modern safety tech, including the self-parking features, you have yourself a pretty capable vehicle. The overall exterior is quite sharp, and this one does have some of the autobiography specifics, for example, like some of these color tones and changes, and even the subtle autobiography logo that you see on the exterior. The other cool thing I want to show you, and that just activated, but if we actually had the vehicle locked, it has this very clean look to it. The mirrors fold in, the door handles are in, and even the steps get hidden, which makes it nice and neat in a parking space, so you lower your chances of something happening to your Range Rover in a parking lot. But the minute you approach it with the key in your hand, you don't even need to hit unlock. You can see some cool things happen. The doors extend and even your power step extends, and a lot of this can even be changed in terms of your actual settings with the vehicle. If you like or don't like some of this, you can disable all of that. The benefit is, of course, you're making it a little bit more aerodynamic when it's actually cruising, and it also just improves the overall cosmetics of the vehicle. Now, some other cool things to talk about is is what's going on underneath. Of course, being a Range Rover, you want it to be as smooth and as quiet as possible. And so you also have this adaptive suspension underneath that is constantly adjusting to improve the suspension and handling characteristics of the Range Rover. On top of that, it also has its various modes which you can actually adjust to improve its overall performing characteristics. In this case, with our Sport, you can also see our optioned red Brembo brakes, which are massive and do help in terms of the overall drivability for this particular vehicle. It also does some cool things like lower itself to make it easier to get in and out of, and of course can lift itself up when you need a little bit of extra ground clearance. You also have things like privacy glass in the back, always a nice touch, while also having very insulated glass throughout the vehicle as well to make it as quiet as possible. Here in the back, again, very short overhangs. You have this weird sort of twin antenna in the back, a nice little sporty roof line here, but then you also have your two fillers. Of course, you have one here on the driver's side, which is going to be your charging port. And then over here on the right side is going to be your gas filler. So you have two different sorts, of course, being a PHEV trait, if you will. The back is very, very stylish. Of course, stands out from the other ones like the full-size Range Rover, but I still think it looks pretty good, especially when you take a look at this lower diffuser section. The other cool benefit of some of the new technology of what is a very, very expensive SUV is you also get power amenities, things like the power rear hatch, which you could go ahead and open up quite easily. And then, of course, when you're done, you can load everything in. And this one doesn't have the sort of split hatch, which I think could be a good thing, for example. And when you're done back here, you can actually adjust some of your suspension settings to make it easier to load items or even lower the seats themselves, which is kind of a neat touch. When you're done, you can simply close the hatch with the touch of a button, which I think is pretty cool. All in all, pretty straightforward on the exterior and underneath. It should also be pointed out that this vehicle is equipped with rear wheel steering, which means the back wheels turn just like the front, albeit not nearly as much. The benefit of this is especially more obvious in a larger vehicle like a Range Rover SUV. When driving at low speeds, the rear wheels can actually turn the opposite direction of the front to give you a shorter turning radius, making the vehicle more maneuverable in places like parking lots. But then at high speeds, they can turn the same direction to improve high-speed stability. So next, let's take a look at the interior, which there's a lot of cool stuff going on in here. First and foremost, I want to say that this is one of the most comfortable vehicles I have ever driven, and that's mostly thanks to these awesome seats here. They are basically pillow-like, which is kind of hard to portray on camera, but you can kind of see even the headrest, for example, have this little bit of a pillow style of headrest. The entire seat is incredibly comfortable, and you combine that with the fact that they also have these side bolsterings and even a bit of leg bolsterings here. You kind of sink into the seat, but then they also do a great job at holding you in place should you want to do a little bit of sporty driving in your Range Rover Sport. But furthermore, on top of that, these are also heated and ventilated massaging seats. So there's a lot of cool functionality in these as well that makes them very comfortable. Now, some of the other cool things I want to point out is how this is kind of an evolution of what Range Rover's been working on. They've oftentimes been going for these minimalistic interiors, and this takes that a little bit further, especially when you look in the middle there and you kind of see that iPad display, which has really replaced all of the physical controls for the main infotainment system. With that, I also want to draw your attention to this door, which has a wonderful mix of all sorts of materials and textures. You can see the Meridian signature sound system nicely blends in as well. And obviously this being the autobiography trim is essentially the top trim is going to have all sorts of cool extras, including this backlit door sill plate here at the bottom. Now here in the door, you can actually see the power controls there for our seats that also have the memory functions actually baked into them. Power window, power mirror controls, the locks, even the way the door handle's nicely integrated is pretty cool. And then you get a nice door pocket here at the bottom. Everything in here is pretty nice as well. Nice rubber floor mats, so if you do take this thing off-road, those are much easier to clean and get everything out, and they have the high clearance around them as well to just hold and capture everything in there. Some of your extra controls like your locking gas cap and your hatch can be found here. Of course, your steering column is all nicely adjustable as well, but with that, let's get in so I can show you the rest of the details. Now, once you get in, this seems pretty straightforward, pretty modern Land Rover / Range Rover. Start it, button over here in the middle, and then everything fires up. So as you can see here, you have two main digital displays. You have this one in the front of the driver and then one over here into the side. And currently you can see the first thing it shows you, of course, is your range, prioritizing your actual gas range or your combined hybrid range and even your electric only, which unfortunately I have burned through, and you can see it's currently at 0 miles, but you can build that up yourself or of course charge it, and you can charge it at home in as little as 5 hours from 0 to 100%, or if you can find a faster charger, you can do 0 to 80 and I believe under an hour. So that's kind of what you're looking at charging time. You can also see the fuel economy there, which of course is also actually better than the EPA recommended for combined driving, which is always nice to see. Now this steering wheel is the classic Land Rover steering wheel. It's been around for a while now. It does have heated control functionality. You're talking about your cruise control and adaptive components are all here on the right side. And over here is sort of your buttons for navigating the main display, changing things, even this little diamond button, which is sort of a custom button that you can set up to do a specific function. You also get paddle shifters, which is definitely a sporty thing to have. And then you can also see the stalks on either side for turn signals, lighting, and wipers and all that stuff, etc. This is all pretty straightforward, and this screen is essentially the same screen used across a variety of various Land Rover products, so a lot of that's pretty straightforward. You also get the benefit of a heads-up display, which is one of those really nice luxuries. In this case, this one's particularly smart with, of course, speed limit recognition, but then it also recognizes other street signs, and it shows you speed, your navigation, etc. So I quite like that setup, and I much prefer a heads-up display when I can get one. Moving on to the center of the car here. This is kind of the big change, right? And that's going to be this iPad display. Previously, they were already doing a good job of minimizing things. You still had some controls that had multi-touch functionality to them, but they've gone away with that for this 2025 Range Rover Sport. And so everything is now in this iPad. And now there's a couple different ways of looking at that, right? The benefit, of course, being the minimalization part. You know where all of your controls are. They're going to be here in this main display, and you don't have to go looking around the vehicle for various controls. It's all right here. The downside of that is what would have been a one-touch function might now take a couple taps here on the screen to actually get to your item. So for example, if you wanted to get to things like your extra seat controls for your heated and ventilated functions, maybe change your AC, whatever the case is, that requires some extra effort to pull up all of the different systems, which is also the time where I show you that you have dual zone operation as well with these separate adjustments for the seats, and then even the back seats are actually separate adjustment, but I'll show you that in a sec. There are some benefits, however. They put some extra thought into this, realizing that, and they created also things like these shortcut menus. So when you fire up the vehicle, you have this main little menu here that has a variety of different things, but then you also have your shortcuts, as I showed you earlier. The cool part about the shortcuts is if you hop in, you want the EV mode, you don't want the EV mode, you want to mess with a variety of the different drive modes, all of that's quite quickly available, which is pretty nice. And you have all sorts of drive modes and a lot of off-road modes, but you also have your max AC buttons, and then you have your actual heated and ventilated seat controls. So you can see there, it's a little bit on the warmer side today, and so we can just hit those buttons and it'll actually turn on our ventilated seats, which I think is kind of a nice touch, and that does get rid of some of the inconvenience of extra taps by having stuff conveniently available. And here's the thing that I want to leave you with as well. Before you look at this and think that this is too overwhelming or you don't want an all touchscreen car, a good way of looking at this is initially it might be a lot. It might be a little bit confusing, but what's going to happen is you're going to get this all set up in your vehicle for just the way that you want it, and then you're really not going to mess with the majority of the controls other than the things that you might adjust on a regular basis, which would be climate controls, and then of course things like your music controls. And so those are actually here on these side tabs, almost like quick navigation buttons, if you will. This more so being the driver's side, and then this one over here being something for quick navigation for the passenger. So it's mainly their AC, volume adjustments, and you have some other cool stuff like the camera system, which on this car doesn't come as a surprise that you have a lot of options. This can be used, of course, in parking lots, but then it also comes with things like off-road cameras to show you what the vehicle's doing. You can see exactly where the front wheels are, all sorts of cool tech like that, which is definitely appreciated. Now, I do want to show you the menus because these can get quite extensive. You do have navigation, CarPlay, Android Auto, all that stuff is, of course, built in, but then over here you have all sorts of stuff going on. Seats, of course, is where you're going to find things like your massaging functions, which you can turn on, and then it gives you a variety of different choices as well. And then if we go further back, give it a second here, then we can go back to the main menu here. And you can see there's all sorts of various options here. You have lots of 4x4 options, including low traction launch, hill descent control, the vehicle dimensions, which helps with things like water fording, weight sensing, EV charging, ride height adjustments, media, air quality for the air purification system, and even a deep clean option, which will actually essentially try to clean the entire vehicle while you leave it in your garage. And that one takes a little bit longer to do, but it's kind of a fun feature. And so you can see all of these various options that are built in here while having the classic things you expect from a system like this. So I think honestly it's a really good system, and it's clear that they've put some thought into this to make this as easy to use as possible, and it integrates with everything nicely and just creates a pretty seamless experience, just albeit with a few more taps. It could be a little bit dangerous to use while driving, but again, once you have it set, you're really not going to worry about it, and you can pretty much adjust some of your other controls via the steering wheel. Now, moving on. You have this very sort of neat display. Piano black is kind of like, it looks good until it doesn't, and obviously it shows everything. But then underneath this panel here, you have a wireless charger, which is a nice touch. Below that, of course, is our shifter, which is an interesting function. You actually have a button here on the back, and then you simply push it down like that. You also have the sport mode, and then you can push it up into reverse. That brings up your backup cameras, which are also predictive, which is great to see. And then to put it in park, you have a physical button here that lights up when it's on. So that's all pretty straightforward. Below this sort of forged carbon panel here is where you'll find your cup holders. That's pretty straightforward, right? And then this one has another cool feature where in the back it has this awesome fridge that has two different climate control settings, as you can see there. And I'll tell you from personal experience, this thing gets extremely cold. You can put lukewarm or room temperature beverages in there, and it won't take long before they are extremely cold and ready to drink. Over here on the passenger side, obviously a lot of this is mimicked. You also have these fun sort of armrests for both the driver and the passenger that you can mess with. And then the other cool part is this glove box, which is actually like power opening for both the top and the bottom. Dual glove box functionality is kind of cool, so you can store your vehicle information in one and just personal items in the other. But then as you take a look up top, you also have an Alcantara headliner with our sunroof, which is all power operated. And then over here is a pretty fun one, right? So you have your main sun visor that is of course backlit, illuminated, very bright. But then the idea is that you could, in theory, move this one over here, and then this one can fold down in place. And so now you've completely barricaded that side of the car in case you're in an awkward sun position, something I'm sure we've all dreamed about, but you have it here as a kind of luxurious option of choice. The other cool part is that you have both a standard mirror and you even have the camera mirror operations over here, which is nice for things like SUVs where it can be hard to see out the actual back of the vehicle. This makes it so you don't even have to worry about any people or luggage items potentially blocking your shot. So I think that's pretty great. The interior is pretty nice. It's obviously going for a minimalistic approach, and it does try to be as luxurious as possible for a $136,000 car. Next, I want to show you the rear, which is incredibly spacious, very luxurious, and very comfortable. It seats a total of 3 across the back here, but I would say it suits 2 most comfortably, most notably in these tan sections that are slightly recessed, making them a little bit more comfortable, and they even feature these pillow-like headrests just like the front. But the coolest part is all of the technological features. For example, here is actually the rear climate controls, and they even have their own heated and ventilated seats, which you can see here, at least for the outer sections. If you're in the middle, you lose out on these benefits, but you still have the vents here in the middle, and then there's even vents on either side at the top, which can also be turned off and nicely adjusted, while also having these beautiful door panels that have things like these integrated sunshades or privacy shades. And you also have power adjustments here, as you can see, to actually move the back seats forward or backwards to slightly adjust the way that they sit. Additionally, you have power locks, the beautifully integrated door handles, power mirrors, all of that Meridian signature sound system here in nice little pockets as well. The really cool part perhaps is also in the center, which if you bring this down, gives you access to these very cool buttons for your cup holders and even this rear little pocket, which is a nice touch. The rear seat is a fantastic place to be if you're sitting in the back of the Range Rover, and it even fits adults, as I will demonstrate now. I'm 6 foot even for reference, and as you can see, I have plenty of headroom, and even my legs with the seat set up for me don't even touch the backs of the seat. So this is a fantastic family hauler for families of all sizes, so long as you don't need to seat more than 5. All right, so what's it like to drive the Sport PHEV plug-in hybrid? Well, if you stop on it, ooh, it takes a little bit, but the minute it kicks in, you feel all of that torque. And because again, it's an SUV that does sit a little bit taller, it can also just rock and kick you back a bit from all of that power as it's shifting and moving the vehicle around. But once it gets moving, it moves pretty good. And like I said earlier, you'll never have any issues, I don't think, with having people loaded up or even the ability to tow up to 6,000 pounds with this thing, giving you all sorts of extra functionality, let's say, just as a result of what is an extremely powerful powertrain inside this vehicle, with the option to, of course, drive it on EV. The other cool part I like is how they actually integrated a lot of the driving systems. You know, so often things are either minimized or complicated too much, but in this case, they give you the luxury of choice in terms of being able to adjust the hybrid system itself with those save modes, the hold mode, or even the hybrid or EV only. And then you also have this separate adjustments for your drive modes, so you can sort of tune that all independently. And I think that's a really nice touch because, you know, it's a luxury of choice really to have the option to select just how you want the car set up or just how you want to use your power as well. Now, let's get into the specifics. Now, the sport in the name, that is there almost more so, I feel like, as a courtesy, because from an actual sporting perspective, there's not a whole lot going on that's super sporty. I guess compared to a regular SUV, it's definitely sportier. But in terms of Range Rover sportiness, obviously this has a ways to go before it becomes an SV, especially in terms of overall performance. It might be a smidge stiffer in terms of overall suspension, but then you also have the adaptive aspects, and when you put the vehicle in dynamic like I have now, it does feel like it firms up a little bit, maybe increases the responsiveness of the gas pedal, and then the steering actually feels a little bit heavier as well in terms of the actual weighted steering. In the normal comfort, eco driving positions, it's really not that interesting to drive. It kind of just feels like a luxury appliance, which I think is going to be fine for most people. After all, this is going to be something that most folks are just going to want as their runabout for going around town, and odds are they might have something if they wanted a fun weekend vehicle, whatever the case is. But this is going to be just fine for that. One distracting feature is, again, I'm not sure how I feel about the minimization of the interior. They've been going that direction for a while now, and I just don't know if I think moving everything into the touchscreen was the best choice, because now it feels as though it can be extra dangerous to adjust certain things on your touchscreen display while driving. Now, maybe that's just my opinion, but that's something that I feel like I may or may not have noticed. The rest of which, though, if you've had a Range Rover or Land Rover product, I should say, within the last 5 to 7 years, all of this is still going to feel right at home, and it all works functionally as well. Now, the other thing you may have noticed, we're on a really rough, really loud road full of cracks, turns, all sorts of stuff. Fun driving road, if you will, but also place in snows, and so it's rough and beat up. And yet, you don't really see me getting thrown around or jostled around. It helps that there's a little bit of bolstering as well in the seats, and so when it comes to these twisties, I can take them in a sort of more fun sporting sense, and I'm not getting thrown around the vehicle. But also the vehicle's handling the potholes and the cracks. And then it's also minimizing the noise. There's no sound system on. I don't even really have the climate controls on. The back is doing its thing in auto, but it's a really, really quiet vehicle. Especially on the highway, even on higher highway speeds. If you're somewhere like Arizona where we have 75-mile-per-hour highways, it's still incredibly quiet even at those speeds. They did a fantastic job of minimizing the wind noise and even the road noise for that matter. So in that sense, it's very much a true Range Rover, full of luxury on the inside. It just happens to have plenty of power even as a plug-in hybrid, which is a lot of fun. The driving characteristics just aren't all that interesting to me. It has plenty of braking. The actual responsiveness, like I said, can sometimes feel delayed if you want to mash it and get the most out of it, but it's going to be fine for excellent regular driving. I'm not sure I've even actually noticed a lot of the shifting in this vehicle as I've been using it. It seems like for the most part it's been very, very smooth. Overall visibility is quite good. The benefit of the rear view mirror is obviously really, really nice. This vehicle being a little bit smaller than the full-size Range Rover gives you a little bit better visibility out the back. You also have nicely adjustable mirrors, but then the A-pillars don't also seem too obstructive in terms of looking backwards and checking your blind spots. It's also really nice. I can look straight through the rear windows as well. There's nothing really that makes this inconvenient, but then you pair that with all of the driving safety assists and cameras in this vehicle, and there's a lot going on, and there's a lot to like. The driving characteristics as well, it does feel on the heavy side, and things like the rural steering that this vehicle is equipped with are some of the things that manufacturers are adding to newer vehicles to try and offset that. This vehicle in particular has a plethora of technology, as I'm sure you figured out by now, that obviously all help in terms of the overall functionality of this vehicle, but also add to the weight. And so it is quite heavy, but it does have a lot of power, and so some of that cancels it out, but still gives it some interesting driving characteristics that you'll have to consider, or at least kind of be mindful of while you're driving the vehicle. But in the classic sense, this is a nice luxury vehicle. But then again, it's $118,000 or $130,000 as equipped in this particular case, and so it is quite an expensive vehicle, but it does feel like there are no compromises in terms of the sound deadening. The powertrain is, again, very, very powerful. You have lots of luxury amenities everywhere in the vehicle. You know, oftentimes it's just the driver that gets the benefits. That's not the case here. The backseat is also a fantastic place to be. Modern amenities all throughout the outside of the vehicle. I quite like this thing. I think if you were in the market for a sporty SUV, this is quick, but you're kind of fooling yourself if you think it's going to be like fun to drive through the canyons. It's not really meant for that. I would say what this is it's a fast, luxurious Range Rover, and the Sport is more so akin to the smaller size rather than the actual sporting nature of the vehicle. I think some of its competitors, especially the SV, even if you wanted to go straight for the actual Sport SUV, obviously have much more sporting and, let's say, personality to them. This just isn't the case. And this powertrain, it's a stout powertrain, also one found in the Defender and other Range Rover models, but it's so quiet too, and obviously that's something that takes away from that sporty driving experience. So it's not really a proper sport SUV. It just kind of happens to be the sport body, but then it's got the PHEV. It has a lot of power. It'll accelerate quite quickly, but then I would argue most luxury vehicles also have that as a trait. It's important to have more powerful engines and powertrains, since luxury vehicles are usually a bit more heavy, and so that's kind of where I feel this falls into that pocket. That being said, you can totally have fun in this, and it's still a proper performer at the end of the day. It's just not really, you know, meant for that. Now, I will say this has been mostly downhill on this twisty road section, and just in the short time I've been talking to you, it's actually already regened itself 4 miles of EV only range, which I'm actually kind of surprised to see. But hey, that's a pretty cool thing as long as mixed with the hybrid technology. So all in all, I think it's a really cool vehicle, and the idea that you could even save so much in gas money, although are you really concerned with that at this price point? You could save so much gas money by using the EV mode. In fact, I saw some users saw most of their driving could be dominated by the EV driving mode in terms of how the vehicle spends its time if they were regularly charging in it. Obviously, that is not something where you can drive it a bunch without charging it. That's kind of regular charging, you know, kind of get home, plug in every time thing. But you still have the gas if that's something that you don't want to be bothered with and you'll only plug it in occasionally, let's say. So it gives a lot of flexibility. I think plug-in hybrids seem to be gaining popularity, and for a valid reason, and this is a really cool take from Range Rover, while also giving you some of the newer Range Rover minimalistic additions that's going into these vehicles, making them very, very luxurious. Whether you lease or buy it, obviously that's up to you and your use case. But I think it's a pretty compelling vehicle, and I think if you like the stuff of the Range Rover offering, because it's always been, you know, such a cool, lustful vehicle, and then of course the sleeper part is that these are fantastic off-roaders, but the reality of it is most people aren't ever going to take these off-road. So while it does have lots of ground clearance, waterfording capabilities, the most it might ever do is pull over on a dusty highway, or maybe have to pull a U-turn into the dirt somewhere. But if you do want to off-road it, it can still do that. It still has lots of cool, intelligent off-road features, including some of the hill climb and hill descent control, all of which is very, very cool. And even if you think you might take this camping or on the occasional trail road, like this would be perfect for that as well. Obviously still all-wheel drive, so great for snowy and less hospitable climate conditions. It really just checks all the boxes. You want a luxury SUV? It's just a unique, interesting take with the plug-in hybrid. With that though, that is the end of the video. I do want to know what you think. Let me know using the comments down below, and if you enjoyed this video, you get subscribed, I really appreciate it, and don't forget to hit that like button as it seriously helps me out. With that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.